these other people in the neighborhood or, the city that aren't necessarily at that level, or, just luck of the draw, their house is flooded and cut off, so now they need help.
And the Cajun Navy is a group of like-minded people that during floods, Louisiana, down those areas, come together. Everybody has a boat. They know their waterways better than anybody, and they get together and they go help their neighbors. And it's a great idea, and I see a lot of people that are in other emergency services look down on it. We send people down. We send people down from Jersey, I think it was the last time, and we made kind of a big deal about sending 8 people in a boat. And I don't understand why sending 8 people in a boat is the Stargate on the other side of the country. I think that it's just, some of it seems like it's more PR because there's lots of pictures taken and they're sending updates. And there was some frustration from them that they weren't getting work when they were there because the Cajun Navy had it handled. Yeah. Well, they do have it handled and they take care of it. And I think what they're doing is good. Now, on the opposite side of that, I would say, at what point does the Cajun Navy have to become a thing where it has to get insurance and do background checks and things?
It's easy to go out and do the saving if you don't have that official responsibility, right? Where, as long as you do something good, they can kind of excuse any mistakes you might make because you don't have an official baseline that you're measured against.
Well, as long as it's spontaneous and it comes up, I get that. You don't need any of that stuff, and that's fine. But if you are showing up on event after event, now you're becoming a real thing, and now you have to put on big boy pants and take some ownership of it, because at some point, do you want to know the background, the criminal background of the person pulling you into that boat? And then it gets complicated, and ultimately it gets ruined by that overcomplication. Because that what's happened in other emergency services is that you get to a point where you take so many courses, so many trainings, where there aren't as many new courses. You don't have the time, the energy, the money, and you're spending your time recertifying on old stuff. So you're constantly recertifying, and it's interesting you said the Cajun Navy, because I could argue either side of that, and both are good, but I think that they're going to have to make a decision because flooding is clearly not going to stop.
No.
And they are good at what they do.
Yeah, that's kind of the double-edged sword. Is like, all right, they work so well because they're very flexible and they know their community. They're great at being able to help those within their community and other communities. But then once you formalize it, does that disappear? Because now it's like, well, why are you only helping this community? Why are you helping them too? Do you have a responsibility, beyond just where you originally want to start? And
I've seen people passively lash out against them. And I say, from what I've seen, it's been more jealousy motivated than anything else, than realistically. But there are valid questions to be answered. And I've felt for the longest time that during the floods and the things of that nature that we should really be in those areas. We should make sure that people have a boat, like people have fire extinguishers, and we should just. I think it's cheaper to make sure everybody has a John boat than it is to move the whole forces of the country there in a panic all the time,
or evacuate the whole city just to the town over and do that every single year.
Every single year. And it's I don't understand that. And we live in a country where I see people that say, looking at what's happening to people in very poor areas and saying, well, I don't understand why they don't move away from the water or move near the water. And I've always wanted to see a commercial with somebody from one of those countries saying, I don't understand why they don't move away from the water, because both are valid. But one, there's an economic problem. You're too poor to move towards the water. You don't have the water. But lots of times, not everywhere, but there are places where people that have the houses near the water are much more money and more expensive. And you're just building in a really risky environment. every time nature gets angry, it owns us, you know?
Yes, it's very good at that.
It's very good at. I mean, nature will slap us down like the insects we are whenever it wants to. And it's proven that. And we're having, you know, they have these 500-year storms. And I was just reading something where we've had, depending on your count, 20 or so in 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that's not good. What happens with the paper when you're done?
So hopefully I can get it published, you know, on the whole academic side of things. I am a graduate student, so publications are kind of the name of the game. My hope is that it ends up being something that people at least take into account when they're saying, all right, do we want to go individual? Do we want to go community focus? How do we build that resilience within some geographic area? What are the factors that need to go into making it so that if that flood happens, people, they have a boat, or, you know, they know that their neighbor down the street, their house is elevated, so they can spend a night there until the water's passed. Things like that. You know, how do you get those conversations started? I'm hoping that my paper is kind of a window into one more factor that goes into that conversation.
And that would be good. It's just, it's going to be so tough because I think that in between from its inception and now, I think CERT lost a generation. And I think that, like many things, you've got a generation that's, you know, I seem to work the word millennial in every week, and not in a positive way. I think you've got a generation of millennials who aren't that civic minded. And I think it's been creeping away prior to them. And we're just seeing years of neglect of civic mindedness coming to a head. And I think that natural occurrence plus the ability to put your face in front of a tiny screen and just focus with laser precision what you want to see has made people more self-involved or closed off from the world. And I don't think that they're really ready or prepared to deal with something. But I do know people on the other side of the coin that are almost in a mode where I don't want to say they're survivalists, but it's like there's no middle ground anymore.
Yeah, it's always one extreme or the other.
Right. There's this percentage of the population that will be found starved to death should Amazon shipping be delayed for more than 3 days. You know, you will lose 20% of the population right there. And then there's this percentage that has, you know, just, you know, too much jerky. Yeah. It's like, what are you waiting for, man?
Yeah, you can't spend all day in the bunker, you know. You got to come out sometimes.
You're going to have jerky madness or something, you know. And I think that somewhere in the middle, like what I always try to get people to do is, and it seems like a silly goal, but it isn't. Be able to survive in your house with no power, no water, no nothing for 3 days. Mm-hmm. 3 days. It sounds low, and it is. But if you can get somebody to survive for 3, they can go for 5. You know, and you could squeak them up to 7, which is what it really becomes. But your average person, I have a friend, and her fridge, she keeps it in a perpetual state of, it looks like it's in the showroom at Best Buy or something. You open up the fridge and there's a little squirrel bait or something in there and a Mountain Dew, and there's just nothing there. And she says, oh, grab something out of the fridge. I'm like, there's nothing there. I said, I can make an ice and mustard sandwich, but you don't have bread, you know? And I don't think we're geared into that mindset. And if somehow we could bring that back and make it popular.
Yeah. It's tough. It's always tough because, you know, there's definitely the financial side of things of, you know, you have to, if you're kind of struggling paycheck to paycheck and you're on food stamps and you're trying to get food, you're not really able to stockpile food. And that's one extreme. But you know, on the other hand, you have people who, they spend their money on just, you know, useless crap on Amazon or whatever. I don't know. I think I'm glad you brought up that you think millennials are less civically minded, because I think that's true, but it also reminds me of what you said kind of at the top of the show, where you spend your time not necessarily at home, but at work or, school or, with whatever club or whatever you do for your hobbies. And I think that's kind of where maybe those messages need to be coming from then, is saying like, hey, if you want to get paid this week, you got to be able to get in, or at least, be in the area for a day or two. Here's some classes, some tips on how to stockpile food, or like what food you should keep on hand because it doesn't need to be reheated, or here's a company flashlight, put it in your emergency response kit. Things like that, I think is a useful way to reach people kind of that are in that working age group, that's their primary mode of connecting with people.
Well, and another thing that this generation is suffering from is employers don't value employees as much.
Yeah,
they just don't. The dedication isn't there on either side, and I think the employers started it.
Yeah.
Not the millennials or not anybody else. There's not that loyalty, and I think people that have less financial means don't get hurt as much in a disaster, because I know what you're saying about they don't have to stockpile food, but they're used to dealing with less.
That's true.
They're used to thinning out the orange juice. They're used to thinning out the soup and the chili. People that have more, when you
more
take
to lose, you're not used to it. Yeah.
Right. I just did I went and looked at a house. I do safety inspections of houses. I looked at a house, and the guy had everything electric. I mean, everything. He had rehabbed an old house, and it was nice. But he didn't have a generator on it. Mm-hmm. And I said that when the power goes out, you and your wife are going to break off the table legs of the dining room, fashion them as spears, and hunt each other after about 3 hours. And he said, no, we'll be fine. The power doesn't go out that much. I said, but it goes out more and more, And
all it takes is that one time. It doesn't matter if it's that one big one. It's hard to plan for it. It's not that fun to plan for it necessarily, but you have to do some minimal amount of planning, right?
Right. We'll talk about it. We'll do a little bit of after show, but there are very simple things you can do. You talked about company flashlights. Have a working flashlight in your house. You can use MREs, meals ready to eat, military meals. They're sold on a civilian level, or you can keep things around that don't spoil as much, canned goods in general, and just cycle through them. You should have a camp stove, is always good to have. It's not like it's a whole lot of money. You should have fire extinguishers. You should have most of these things. You should have either way. I think, bottled water. More people have bottled water in their houses now than used to, because for some reason, someone has done a masterful job of tricking everybody that unless you are constantly hydrated, you will turn to dust and die between walking from your office to your car. Because if you look at meetings now, if you look at a picture of a meeting, it's really fascinating. Look at a business meeting picture between decades and look at the changes and what's on the table at the meeting. And you go back to the 50s, and the meeting just had like more smoke in it than like downtown Beijing. Ashtrays. I mean, these ornate ashtrays, the poor ashtray market that's went out of business. There used to be great ashtrays. And now it's like there's enough water in there to put out a small fire on the table. And between water and coffee, are you interested in any public input, or are you just going for people that've done CERT?
So I'm looking mostly at CERT just from, it makes the study a little easier to have that standardized, training of this is what you need to do. I think maybe in the future, just get that general understanding of what's kind of the baseline for people in this area in Pennsylvania or the greater Philly area, see how they feel, because we do have quite a wide range of communities, even within a relatively small geographic area. And in terms of income, in terms of race, in terms of politics, in terms of everything, it's a very interesting range of people.